I need to see your papers. Are you a U.S. citizen?
Yes, I was born in Mississippi in 1948. I served 2 tours in Vietnam with the 173rd Airborne. What's this about?
We've received information that you may not be legally present in this country. I need documentation proving your citizenship.
Not legally.
Raymond Walker never imagined that at 75 years old, he would be forced to explain why he belonged in the country he once fought for. It was supposed to be an ordinary afternoon. He had just left the Veterans Affairs clinic, prescription bag folded neatly in his hand, the same routine he'd followed for years. His body moved slower now, arthritis in the knees, old shrapnel injuries that never fully healed. But the discipline of a soldier never leaves. As he stepped into the parking lot of the small strip mall beside the clinic, a voice called out behind him. "Sir, I need you to stop right there." Raymond turned. A man in plain clothes stood several yards away, badge raised, posture rigid. Homeland Security Investigations. At first, Raymond assumed it was a mistake. Maybe someone needed directions. Maybe the agent was looking for someone else. Instead, the man asked a question that made Raymond's stomach tighten. "Can you provide proof of your citizenship?" For a moment, Raymond didn't respond. Not because he didn't understand the words, but because he couldn't believe they were meant for him. He was 75 years old, a Vietnam combat veteran, a man whose body still carried the cost of war. And now, in a parking lot outside a VA clinic, a federal agent was asking him to prove he was American. What Raymond didn't know yet was that the agent had been dispatched due to an anonymous report, later proven to be false and malicious, claiming a suspicious foreign mail reminded witnesses of an undocumented immigrant. That anonymous call was all it took. No warrant, no investigation, no verification, just a tip, and federal power moved instantly. Unbeknownst to both men, surveillance cameras mounted above the storefronts were recording everything. Every word, every pause, every moment that would later shock the nation. Because this confrontation would not end quietly. It would end in a courtroom. And eventually, in a $16.8 million judgment against the federal government. But before that reckoning came, there was a life, long before the parking lot, long before the badge. A life shaped by survival. Raymond Walker was born in 1948 in Greenwood, Mississippi, the Deep South, the final years of Jim Crow. He was the youngest of 6 children in a household that never knew comfort, only endurance. His mother cleaned white families' homes from sunrise to sunset. His father worked at the cotton gin, hands cracked and permanently stained, earning barely enough to keep food on the table. Growing up, Raymond learned early that the rules of America were not the same for everyone. He watched his older brother come home bleeding one night, beaten for trying to register to vote. He remembered the day his uncle walked away after an argument with a group of white men near the railroad tracks. No one ever saw him again. No investigation. No questions. Just silence. In Greenwood, silence was how things stayed buried. By the time Raymond turned 18 in 1966, his choices were painfully limited. College wasn't an option. There was no money. Jobs available to young black men paid barely enough to survive. And the town offered no future, only repetition. The military, however, promised something different. A uniform, a paycheck, a way out. His mother cried when he told her. His father warned him quietly. "They don't treat us the same in the service either," he said. But Raymond enlisted anyway. Because sometimes survival means choosing the least dangerous door, even when all of them carry risk. He was assigned to the 173rd Airborne Brigade, and in early 1967, he was sent to Vietnam. He arrived at the height of America's involvement in the war, barely 18 years old, still a teenager. Within weeks, innocence disappeared. His first tour lasted 15 months. 15 months of constant fear. Jungle patrols where every step could trigger a mine. Rice paddies where gunfire erupted without warning. Night ambushes where the darkness itself felt alive. He fought during operations in the Central Highlands. Survived the Battle of Dak II. Watched friends fall beside him. Men whose names still echoed in his memory decades later. He saw things no teenager should ever see. Did things no young man is ever truly prepared to do. And when he came home, he discovered another truth. America didn't want to hear about Vietnam. There were no parades. No thank you speeches. Only silence, and sometimes hostility. But Raymond didn't complain. He built a quiet life. Worked steady jobs. Raised a family. Paid taxes. Never asked for special treatment. All he wanted was peace. And for nearly 50 years, he had it. until one afternoon, in a parking lot, outside a VA clinic, a federal agent decided he needed to prove that he belonged. But Vietnam wasn't only loss. In the middle of chaos, Raymond had also found something rare: brotherhood. Out there, survival erased divisions. Skin color didn't stop bullets. Rank mattered less than reliability. The men beside you were your lifeline, no matter where they came from. In the jungle, competence mattered more than anything else. That bond stayed with him long after the fighting stopped. When Raymond returned to the United States in 1968, just weeks after the Tet Offensive, the country he came back to barely resembled the one he'd left. America was unraveling. Protests filled the streets. The anti-war movement was everywhere. Soldiers weren't welcomed home. They were avoided, sometimes insulted, sometimes blamed. And for a black veteran returning to Mississippi, the reception was even colder. At home, the civil rights struggle was still raging. Overseas, he had been fighting one war. Back in America, another one waited. He didn't feel fully accepted in either place. Vietnam had changed him. America confused him. So in 1969, Raymond made a decision that surprised even his family. He volunteered for a second tour. Not because he believed in the war, not because he wanted glory, but because, strangely enough, Vietnam made more sense than home. His second deployment was harder than the first, more intense, more violent. During an ambush near Pleiku, shrapnel tore into his leg. He was evacuated and spent 2 months recovering. When doctors cleared him, he went right back to his unit. That injury earned him the Purple Heart. Later, he would also receive the Bronze Star for valor. He almost never spoke about what he did to earn it. Some memories weren't meant for conversation. When Raymond finally returned home in 1970, he was just 22 years old. But he felt decades older. The VA treated his physical wounds, stitched the skin, managed the pain. But in that era, no one talked about trauma. Nightmares were something you handled alone. Silence was the standard. Raymond used the GI Bill to retrain as an auto mechanic. He left Mississippi behind and moved west to Phoenix, Arizona, a place with no family history, no ghosts waiting on street corners. There, he built a quiet life. He worked at the same auto shop for over 30 years, married a schoolteacher named Dorothy, raised 2 daughters, later became a grandfather to 4. He wasn't loud. He didn't chase recognition. He didn't talk much about the war. He just lived. Now, at 75 years old, Raymond was retired. Dorothy had passed away 3 years earlier. His days followed a familiar rhythm. Doctor visits at the VA, coffee with fellow veterans at the VFW hall, helping his daughters with their children. His body carried reminders of everything he'd endured. A limp that flared when rain approached, the shrapnel never fully forgotten. Permanent hearing loss from artillery blasts. And dreams that sometimes pulled him back into the jungle without warning. Still, he kept moving. Because that's what soldiers do. Tuesday, November 14th, 2023 began like any other day. Raymond had a scheduled appointment at the VA clinic in North Phoenix. He needed to pick up his monthly medications, blood pressure pills, and pain medicine for his leg. The appointment was set for 9 a.m. He arrived early. Always early. A habit the military never lets go of. He waited 40 minutes in the lobby. Spent another 20 reviewing medications with the pharmacist. At 10:15 a.m., he walked out of the clinic. In his hand, a simple white paper bag. Inside it, nothing more dangerous than prescriptions meant to keep an old soldier healthy. What he didn't know was that within minutes, that ordinary walk back to his car would turn into the most humiliating encounter of his life. An encounter that would force a 75-year-old combat veteran to prove that he was American. The VA clinic sat inside a small strip mall. Nothing remarkable. A tax preparation office on one side, a dollar store on the other. A small neighborhood grocery buzzing with late-morning customers. The parking lot was busy, cars pulling in, engines starting, people moving through their routines without giving much thought to anything beyond their next errand. Raymond Walker moved slowly toward his truck. A 15-year-old Ford F-150. Not pretty, not new, but maintained with the kind of care only someone who values reliability over appearance would give. He always parked close to the sidewalk. Not out of convenience, but necessity. The shrapnel lodged in his leg from Vietnam still flared without warning, especially when he walked too far or stood too long. He reached the driver's door and slid the key into the lock. That's when he sensed someone approaching. Fast. Deliberate. The kind of movement that doesn't wander, it targets. "Excuse me, sir. I need to speak with you." Raymond turned. Standing to his left was a white man in his mid-30s. Khaki pants, a fitted polo shirt, a badge clipped openly to his belt, a service weapon resting clearly on his hip. Not uniformed, but unmistakably law enforcement. The man flipped open a credential wallet. Homeland Security Investigations. A division of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. "I need to see your papers," the agent said. Then, without pause, "Where were you born?" The words hit harder than Raymond expected. Not because he didn't have an answer, but because of what the question implied. At 75 years old, after 2 tours in Vietnam, after bleeding for a country that once barely acknowledged him, he was being asked to justify his right to exist in a parking lot. His chest tightened, a familiar feeling, part confusion, part anger, part something older, something learned during Jim Crow, sharpened during war, and carried quietly ever since. But Raymond didn't raise his voice. He didn't step forward. He didn't argue. Not yet. Decades of military discipline took control. "Son," he said calmly, "I was born in Mississippi in 1948. I served 2 tours in Vietnam with the 173rd Airborne Brigade." He paused, then added, "Now you tell me what this is about." Above them, mounted to a tall light pole, the strip mall surveillance camera captured everything. High definition, wide angle, both faces clearly visible. Every shift in posture, every tightening of jaw, every moment that would later be replayed in a courtroom. Agent Kyle Morrison stepped closer. His stance hardened. The space between them shrank, intentionally. "Sir, we've received information that you may not be legally present in the United States." Raymond blinked. Not legally present. At 75. "Based on that information," Morrison continued, "I need documentation proving your citizenship. A birth certificate, passport, or naturalization papers." For a moment, Raymond just stared at him. Then his voice rose, not in rage, but in disbelief. "Not legally present?" 60 years of memory surged forward all at once. Being told where he could sit, which water fountain he could use, which neighborhoods he shouldn't drive through at night. And now this. "Boy," Raymond said, his voice firm, "I was dodging bullets in the Mekong Delta while you were probably still in diapers." He tapped his leg. "There's shrapnel in here with my name on it." Then slowly, "I've got a Purple Heart and a bronze star sitting on my mantle at home." He looked directly at the agent. "So tell me something. What kind of papers do you want from a man who already paid in blood?" The parking lot didn't stop moving. Shoppers walked past. Cars reversed. Someone paused, sensing tension, then kept walking. Because moments like this don't announce themselves. They unfold quietly, until it's too late. And standing there between a grocery store and a tax office, a decorated combat veteran was being treated like a suspect in his own country. All because of a report no one could verify. All because someone decided he didn't look like he belonged. And what happened next would expose just how fragile citizenship becomes. When anonymous tips replace evidence, and authority replaces reason. The moment Raymond raised his voice, everything changed. Agent Morrison's face tightened. The surveillance camera caught it clearly. The shift in expression, the flash of irritation, the loss of patience. "Sir," Morrison snapped, "I am a federal agent conducting an official investigation." He leaned forward slightly. "I don't care about your military service. I care about your legal status in this country." Then the threat. "Show me documentation right now, or you will be detained for further investigation." For a second, Raymond just stared at him. Didn't care about his service. The words landed heavier than any insult. "Don't care about my service?" Raymond repeated, disbelief cracking through his voice. "I fought for this country." His hand trembled as he gestured toward his leg. "I bled for that flag. I came home with metal in my body that still sets off detectors." His voice rose, not in anger alone, but in pain. "And now you're standing here asking me to prove I'm American?" That's when another vehicle pulled into the lot. A second HSI SUV. Another agent stepped out, Agent Sarah Chin. Her body camera was already activated, creating a second angle that would later become impossible to explain away. She approached quickly. "Is there an issue here?" "Subject is refusing to provide documentation of legal presence," Morrison said, his hand drifting toward the handcuffs on his belt. "I'm preparing to detain him for verification." "I haven't refused anything," Raymond said sharply. I told him I'm an American citizen. I told him I'm a Vietnam veteran. His voice tightened. I don't carry my birth certificate around because I've never had to prove I belong in my own country. He opened his wallet. Hands shaking now, whether from age, adrenaline, or decades of buried anger, the camera couldn't tell. Out came his identification. Arizona driver's license. VA medical card clearly marked veteran. A military retiree ID he had carried for more than 40 years. He held them out. Raymond Walker. Born April 15, 1948. Greenwood, Mississippi. He looked up. I served in the United States Army from 1966 to 1970. Honorably discharged. He swallowed. What else do you want from me? Morrison barely looked. These don't prove citizenship. Raymond's jaw clenched. Anyone can get a driver's license, Morrison continued. I need a birth certificate or passport. My passport is at home, Raymond said through his teeth. My birth certificate is in a safety deposit box. I'm 75 years old. He pointed toward the street. I live 20 minutes from here. I can go get them. Or, he gestured toward the VA building. You can call the VA right now and verify my entire record. Morrison shook his head. That's not how this works. Then the words no American citizen should hear without cause. You're coming with us for processing. The parking lot camera captured the moment everything collapsed. Morrison reached out and grabbed Raymond's arm. Instinct took over. Not violence. Not aggression. Reflex. Decades old. Raymond pulled his arm back sharply. Don't you put your hands on me, he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had once led others into combat. I'm a United States citizen. I haven't committed a crime. You have no legal right to detain me. You're resisting a federal officer, Morrison barked, reaching for his cuffs. Turn around. Now. Resisting, Raymond shouted, his voice echoing across the lot. I'm exercising my rights. I fought for those rights. I watched men die for those rights. Then he said the words many watching already understood. You're doing this because I'm black and walking to my truck. People stopped. Phones came out. A pharmacy technician stepped outside, recognizing Raymond as a regular patient. An elderly man wearing a faded Vietnam veteran cap moved closer. That's Ray Walker, the man yelled. He's a decorated combat veteran. What the hell are you doing to him? Morrison ignored them all. He grabbed Raymond again, harder this time. Raymond resisted instinctively, his injured leg buckling beneath him. He stumbled. Agent Chin moved in. Together, they forced his arms behind his back. The surveillance footage showed it in brutal clarity. 2 federal agents subduing a 75-year-old combat veteran. His VA medication bag spilling onto the asphalt. His military ID cards sliding across the pavement. The handcuffs snapped shut. Metal against skin. And in that moment, for the first time since Vietnam, Raymond Walker felt powerless. Not afraid. He had faced enemy fire and lived. But powerless in a different way. A deeper way. A way that cut worse than shrapnel ever had. This is wrong, he said softly, his voice breaking. And the cameras kept rolling. Everything I gave, everything I sacrificed. Raymond's voice cracked. And you're treating me like I don't belong in my own country. They guided him toward the SUV as the scene around them grew louder. Bystanders were no longer silent. A Vietnam veteran was already on his phone, his voice sharp and furious. The pharmacy technician held her camera high, recording every second. Others shouted questions. Why are you arresting a veteran? What did he do? Who gave you the right? None of it mattered. Agents Morrison and Chin didn't answer. They didn't slow down. They placed Raymond in the back seat of the federal vehicle. A steel divider separating him from the front, turning the space into a cage. Agent Chin's body camera captured his face through the barrier. Tears ran down the lines carved by age, war, and time. Not tears of fear. Tears of betrayal. I killed people for this country, Raymond whispered. His voice barely rose above the hum of the engine. I watched my friends die. I came home with nightmares that never stopped. He swallowed hard. And this is what my service means. The drive to the HSI field office took 35 minutes. Raymond spoke very little. His mind drifted instead. To the day he enlisted at 18. To the drill sergeant who told him he was now part of something bigger than himself. To his first firefight, the moment fear nearly froze him in place. To dragging a wounded soldier through gunfire, the act that later earned him a Bronze Star. To coming home in 1970 and watching his mother cry for an hour straight. to holding his daughters for the first time, to standing beside his wife's coffin 3 years earlier as the honor guard folded the flag. All of it felt distant now, cheapened, reduced to nothing more than a man sitting handcuffed in the back of a federal vehicle. At the field office, there was no ceremony, no recognition, no respect. They processed him like any other detainee. Fingerprints, fingers that once held rifles, that once held dying men, that later worked engines for 30 years. Photographs, a mugshot of a decorated combat veteran. Property inventory, wallet, keys, medication, military ID cards sealed inside a plastic evidence bag. "I want to call my daughter," Raymond said quietly. "I have the right to a phone call." "You'll get your call after we verify your status," Morrison replied without looking up. "Verify what?" Raymond asked. His patience was gone now, replaced by something colder. "I gave you my social security number. Run it. Call the Department of Defense. Call the VA. I've been in government databases longer than you've been alive. What exactly are you verifying?" Morrison didn't answer. He typed. Minutes passed. Then the screen changed. Raymond Walker, United States citizen, birthright. Social Security issued Mississippi, 1948. U.S. Army service, 1966 to 1970. Honorable discharge. Purple Heart recipient. Bronze Star recipient. VA benefits active since 1970. No criminal history. No immigration record, because none could exist. Morrison stared at the screen. His face drained of color. Agent Chin leaned in, read it once, then closed her eyes. They had just detained, handcuffed, and processed a 75-year-old American war veteran, based on nothing. "Mr. Walker," Morrison said stiffly, "there appears to have been a mistake. You're free to go." "A mistake?" Raymond repeated quietly. "You put handcuffs on me. You humiliated me in public. You treated me like a criminal. And you call that a mistake?" They removed the cuffs, returned his belongings. Raymond rubbed his wrists, the red marks still fresh. Then he looked at both agents, a look that made them drop their eyes. "I want to know what information you received," he said. "I want to know who reported me. And I want it in writing." After a pause, Morrison printed the complaint. Raymond read it slowly. Anonymous caller. Suspicious foreign-looking male. Didn't sound American. Possibly using false documents to access VA benefits. No name. No evidence. Just one phrase. Foreign-looking. Foreign-looking, Raymond repeated. His voice was steady now, dangerous in its calm. "So I'm black, and that made me foreign. And you believed it. You didn't verify. You didn't investigate. You just saw a black man and assumed the racist was right." Neither agent spoke. There was nothing to say. Raymond walked out of the building at 2:15 p.m. For hours after being stopped in a parking lot. His daughter was waiting outside. She ran to him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. "Dad, are you okay?" That's when he broke. He sobbed into her shoulder, the kind of crying that comes when strength finally runs out. "They treated me like I don't belong here," he said. "After everything I gave. They treated me like I'm nobody." But Raymond Walker was not nobody. He had witnesses, security footage, federal body cameras, medical records, military documentation, and a daughter who happened to be a civil rights attorney. Within a week, the case was built. 3 weeks later, the lawsuit was filed. Raymond Walker versus United States Department of Homeland Security. Special Agent Kyle Morrison. Special Agent Sarah Chin. The allegations were devastating. Violation of the Fourth Amendment. False imprisonment. Racial profiling. Age discrimination. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Deprivation of rights under color of law. And this time, the evidence spoke louder than excuses. The evidence was overwhelming. Parking lot surveillance footage showed everything. A 75-year-old man, holding his VA medication bag, confronted, questioned, and forcibly detained by federal agents. His protests ignored. His military ID rejected. Chen's body camera footage, reluctantly turned over during discovery, confirmed it all. Witness statements from the pharmacy technician, a fellow Vietnam veteran, and bystanders, every account matched. The anonymous complaint that triggered it? Purely racial. Foreign-looking, didn't sound American. Applied to a black man from Mississippi, speaking with a southern accent. No verification. No investigation. Just assumption. And the agent's failure to act responsibly, detaining a decorated, elderly veteran without proof of wrongdoing. revealed a systemic pattern of bias. The case went to trial 18 months later. The federal courthouse filled daily with veterans organizations, civil rights groups, and a media hungry for every detail. Raymond Walker took the stand. For 2 full days, he recounted his life to the jury. Growing up under Jim Crow, Mississippi. Enlisting to escape poverty. Surviving Vietnam. Returning to a country that barely recognized his sacrifice. Building a quiet life. And then, at 75, being handcuffed for the crime of being black in a parking lot. "I've carried shrapnel in my leg for 54 years, he told the jury, voice breaking. "Every morning I feel it. Every time it rains, I'm reminded that I bled for this country. I've lost friends whose names are on a wall in Washington. And after all that, an anonymous racist makes a call. Federal agents decide I need to prove I'm American. Tell me, what else could I have done? How many more times do I have to prove I belong?" His daughter testified. She described finding him sobbing outside the federal building, a proud man diminished before his own eyes. She spoke of the anger, the shame, the psychological toll, and the change in him that day. Military records specialists verified his service, decorations, and honorable discharge. Constitutional law experts testified to the Fourth Amendment violations, the lack of probable cause, the unlawful detention, and the human cost of ignoring clear evidence. The surveillance footage played repeatedly, each time exposing the humiliation, the injustice, and the sheer audacity of detaining a decorated combat veteran in broad daylight. The defense tried to argue procedure, but the evidence was indisputable. Military ID? Ignored. Age? Ignored. Citizenship? Ignored. The racial undertone? Clear. After 9 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The damages were historic, $16.8 million total. $5.3 million in compensatory damages, emotional distress, false imprisonment, and violation of constitutional rights. $11.5 million in punitive damages, sending a clear message. Racial profiling, disrespecting veterans, and ignoring constitutional protections comes at a price. Raymond Walker sat quietly as the verdict was read. No celebration, just a nod. A soldier acknowledging a mission completed. Both agents were terminated. Their supervisor, who failed to question the fraudulent anonymous complaint, was demoted. HSI announced sweeping policy reforms. Mandatory verification of anonymous complaints before enforcement action. Acceptance of military ID as valid proof of citizenship. Bias in veterans' rights training. Prohibition on detaining individuals at VA facilities without extraordinary justification. Raymond donated a significant portion of the settlement to veterans organizations and civil rights groups. He became a speaker, military events, civil rights conferences, sharing his story not with bitterness, but with determination that it would protect others. The parking lot surveillance footage? Required viewing in federal law enforcement training. A stark reminder, assumptions can override facts. Bias can corrupt authority. And even the most decorated, oldest veterans are not immune. Back in Phoenix, Raymond Walker returned to his quiet life. But something had been restored, the certainty that his service mattered, the knowledge that his citizenship could not be challenged, and the proof that, even at 75, a combat veteran could fight one more battle and win. If you believe military service should mean something, that veterans deserve respect, and that citizenship isn't determined by appearance or accent, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because stories like Raymond's prove the fight for dignity and justice never ends. It requires vigilance, it requires courage, and it requires standing up when authority oversteps its bounds.